Because if this is about justice and protecting sisters from domestic abuse, why didn't you run him to the police when you were still with Puffy? Why are we just now hearing about this 8 years later or however many years after the fact? Why did you wait until you married a white man and then came back to get the black man's money? Was this about money or was this about justice? I'm not shaming her. I'm simply saying I'm confused. Because if this is about women's rights and protecting women, why didn't you run his ass into the police back when this was happening? It's not like he a brother who just got out of prison, Art. It's not like he's a homeless boyfriend from high school. It's not like he's a brother working a regular 9 to 5. This is Sean Puffy Combs, the face of black music, who was a mogul before Jay-Z became a mogul.
Hey all, welcome back to Themis and Thought. Grab your coffee, water, tea, whatever you're drinking, go and get that. This is Sarasi tea. It's really bitter. Trigger warning, we're going to be talking about DV. Because Dr. Umar decided that he was going on the Art of Dialogue's channel to do an interview, and he said some pretty wild things and made claims that, one, I didn't think he would agree with, but two, I find highly inappropriate the way he's using some of the issues within the black community, in my opinion, to defend Diddy. We'll get to the word defense in a moment. Now, I know that a lot of us are casted out. I understand that a lot of us don't want to have the conversation anymore. I think we should continue to have it, not just around Cassie, but around all women that are experiencing abuse. And so the conversation should continue. However, when it comes to Dr. Umar, I do believe that we have a responsibility to drag him at every corner, in every interview, every single time that he is public facing around any discussion. He should be dragged. Until Dr. Umar presents a school that is operational, I don't want to hear anything from Dr. Umar, and he should continuously be dragged. That is a stance that I have and I will continue to have. Now, in a lot of ways, this video is about manipulation more broadly, mass manipulation, but more specifically, Dr. Umar and his attempt at manipulating the black community to defend Diddy against a system that is just, if not always, because it's not always, in this very specific case. The system is not the justice system, mind you. The system is a media conglomerate in some ways that has decided to put to the forefront the abuse of women in the same way the Me Too movement really captured some of what was happening to women in the media sphere in Hollywood. It somehow skipped the hip-hop industry, and seeing a kind of reckoning in the hip-hop community around the abuse of women, I think is a good thing. But Dr. Umar is attempting to subvert, in my opinion, what is happening and the real calls for justice. So let's start with what Dr. Umar had to say on this channel, The Art of Dialogue.
But I gotta ask you, what was your reaction when you seen the video of Diddy attacking Cassie?
Okay. The trials and tribulations of Sean Puffy Combs and the Cassie debacle. Here's what I'm going to say. I want to respond to your question on the Diddy situation morally and ethically, and then I want to respond to it legally and procedurally, because I believe they're separate. American law isn't based on justice. We know that. American law isn't based on righteousness. We know that. American law isn't based on morality or ethics. We know that. So I have to respond with the moral side as a black man watching a black man not only put his hands, but also put his feet on a woman. And I don't care what color the woman is. No woman should ever be harmed by a man. I don't care if she's red, black, blue, purple, or brown. No woman should ever be assaulted by a man. And I can't say that enough. So from a moral perspective, from a black man perspective, what Sean Puffy Combs did by not only putting hands, but also putting feet on that woman and then dragging her down the hallway is unacceptable. It is reprehensible. It was absolutely disgusting, grotesque, and to some degree, unforgivable. I'm 10 toes down with the black community on the fact that what Puffy did was without question conduct unbecoming a man, let alone a role model. You have no argument from me on that point. I want to be clear on that. Wrong, wrong, wrong. But now I have to turn the mirror on Black America. And I have to ask Black America a very serious question. Are you really against domestic violence?
So Dr. Umar does a couple of things here, right? The question, mind you, is what were his thoughts on seeing Diddy beating Cassie? Instead of really talking about his feelings, seeing that, he goes into a kind of diatribe, in a way, about the trials and tribulation that Diddy is going through. Now, I must mark this conversation happening with a caveat that he does say what Diddy did was bad, but he starts off by making Diddy a victim, or in some ways the hero, the antagonist in a story that is going to go through some trials. That's how he starts it off. I think this is a very disturbing thing to do. I think it's underhanded, and I think it is an example of the beginning of what I believe to be an attempt at manipulation in defense of Diddy. So the question again, what were his thoughts on seeing Diddy beating Cassie? He says he's going to talk about it morally and ethically, and then he's going to talk about it legally. I didn't think Dr. Umar was a lawyer, but whatever. Let's go with it. If you want to remember, please write it down, because the question had to do with seeing Diddy attacking Cassie, your feelings about that, Dr. Umar. He goes on, why would he not answer the question for me is a problem? Could it be that instead of saying, I felt blah, whatever blah is, about seeing Diddy attacking Cassie, that Dr. Umar was attempting to contextualize harm in a way that makes the victimizer the victim. This again is how I open, right, with him putting Diddy in a sort of a person who is experiencing something, trials and tribulation, as if his own actions didn't cause what it is that he's going through. There's no trial and tribulation. Again, there's action, and then there are consequences to said actions. And it is weird for Dr. Umar to gain any kind of following around these ideas, protecting Diddy, that is, when he goes on this dusty diatribe about American legal system. I believe he's talking about the American legal system in a way to evoke the experience of Black people all across America, and if not themselves, people they know who have experienced injustice at the hands of the criminal justice system, and that being the animating notion in our minds, start to kind of put us in a framework of thinking this might be unjust. Right? This might be injustice, right? That the way that people in the media and maybe the criminal justice, which hasn't started coming after Diddy yet, but they're investigating, they haven't grabbed him yet. They raided his home, so they're coming. He wants us to think that our injustices as Black people in relation to the criminal justice system should probably be thought about when we think of Diddy and his potential engagement with the same criminal justice system. I think that is diabolical. I think that there's this undertone of they're out to get the Black man, and he's going to say it outright. He said this outright, mind you, but he's gonna say it. So morally, he believes what Diddy did was wrong. Hands and feet on Cassie, dragging her across the floor, throwing things at her, all of that. He sees it as bad. But he wants to take it a step further, to condemn America, right? He's not able to look at the situation and talk about the situation. He wants to condemn America, and he wants you to condemn America. And he's questioning our morality as Black people, mind you, when he asks, are we Americans, really Black Americans, are we really against domestic violence? And I'll answer the question for him. Are we Black Americans, are we Black people, let's do Black people, are we against domestic violence? I think we can answer this in two parts. The first is theoretically, and that's the easiest. Yes, we are against DV. In practice, it doesn't seem we are. Too many women are victims of DV in the Black community, and we pretend they aren't. And these women also pretend they aren't. We do not engage with the justice system in a way to get, again, justice for the harm being caused intra-racially. And that is a problem. So, in truth, the answer to the question being posed, are we, as Black people, against domestic violence? I think we are, or at least we think we are. But in practice, we don't protect those who are the most vulnerable, and we don't report the abusers who engage this way. And so in practice, I don't think we can legitimately say that we are when we do nothing to prevent DV happening within the culture. But if Umar cared about DV with the platform he has and the voice that he has within the cultural milieu, why isn't he front and center when it comes to discussion around DV within the Black community? Why is DV and conversations about DV not a cornerstone of Dr. Umar's rhetoric? Why doesn't he care about it? He only brings it up to distract and to shift the energy aimed at Diddy and away into nothingness, because he's not pointing it internally at the culture to look at the men in the culture and the harm that they have caused. I will go back to this in a moment. He's not looking at that. He is telling you that you're a hypocrite because you don't actually care about DV, because you haven't held to account people who've engaged violently within your own homes, families, right? Neighborhoods. You have not engaged, therefore you shouldn't look at Diddy. But is he telling you to report them? We'll get back to that in a moment. Because instead of saying don't look at Diddy, don't talk about Diddy because you're a hypocrite if you do, instead of saying, well, talk about him, but also talk about the other people within the community that are causing harm, he's just telling you, well, if you didn't talk about them, don't talk about Diddy. You're a hypocrite. How useful is that? How useful is that? Again, he only brings up what happens generally within the community to chastise those people speaking out and being outraged by what they saw with Diddy and Cassie as a way to highlight hypocrisy without trying to fix the hypocrisy, leaning in the way of preventing DV. When I say leaning in the way of preventing DV, what I mean by that is call people hypocrite for calling out Diddy and then empower them to talk about more people who are acting in a similar way as Diddy. Don't tell them to shut up talking about Diddy because they didn't talk about the people who have abused other people in their family. Tell them to talk about both. And that's why it's a problem to me. To be clear, when given the chance to speak about Black women in the Black community, Dr. Umar had a lot to say. There was a conversation happening on Fox Soul about the war on Black men. And when Dr. Umar was asked specifically about Black women in the Black community, this is what Dr. Umar had to say about Black women.
Because I am not a misogynist and I do not support that type of narrative that said the Black woman's position is only to have children and to prepare food. But at the same time, I think Black women have to look at themselves, because although white supremacy has been the greatest enemy of the progress of Black men, you would also have to argue that Black women have probably been the greatest accomplice to supporting the white power structure in their destruction of Black males, i.e. the conversation we're having right now, where two intelligent Black women have yet to indict white supremacy for the role that they play in the destabilization of the lives of Black men.
He claims that Black women are the greatest accomplice to white supremacy. Black women are the greatest accomplice to white supremacy. A third time in the name of Dr. Umar, Black women are the greatest accomplice to white supremacy. With this rhetoric, and rhetoric like this, it's no wonder why Black women do not call the police or even stand up for themselves when they are being abused at the hands of Black men. If you believe Black women are the greatest accomplice to white supremacy and you tell them that, how do they not be the greatest accomplice to white supremacy in your mind? Because it could just be that Dr. Umar actually believes that Black women are the greatest accomplice to white supremacy. He could actually believe that. But I don't think he means that. I believe Dr. Umar does not truly believe that Black women are the greatest accomplice to white supremacy. He can't. They're the greatest contributor to his non-existent school. So that is a wild statement to make. But it is an attempt to emotionally manipulate Black women. The problem with this is if you tell Black women that, and then you also point out that they're being abused and no one is doing anything about it, you are not empowering them to call police on Black men. You can't both tell them that, Black women, that they're the greatest accomplice to white supremacy and also say they do nothing intraracially when Black men are abusing them. It's a very difficult thing to grapple with and to reconcile. And I think Dr. Umar knows this. So in Dr. Umar's mind, Black women are the greatest accomplice to white supremacy, and they are also being abused at the hands of Black men, and they do nothing about it, and they are supposed to be blamed, and they're hypocrites for pointing out Cassie because they do nothing about their own abuse. That's wild. Now, let's hear about the Black community's hypocrisy, because we cut it off before he could speak on this. So let's listen to Dr. Umar talk about the hypocrisy that he sees in the Black community.
And I have to ask Black America a very serious question. Are you really against domestic violence? Or are you simply glorying in the downfall of a very successful rap mogul, and you're using the domestic violence incident as a justification to celebrate his fall from grace? And the reason I have to ask this question, Art, is because 40% of Black women in America are domestically abused every day in this country. 40%, that's almost half the Black women in this country are victimized by their lovers, their husbands, their boyfriends, their baby dads, their fiancés. So if Black men are appalled by Puff Daddy's behavior, if Black women are appalled by Puff Daddy's behavior, why do we have so much domestic violence in the Black community? Let me ask it another way. You want Puffy to suffer for what he did, and he should. But did you call the police when you heard your son beating his girlfriend up upstairs? Did you call the police when you heard your nephew choking out his girlfriend last week? Did you call the police when you heard your grandfather smacking up your grandmother in the back room? See, I cannot condone hypocrisy, Art.
Are people celebrating? Are people really celebrating Diddy's downfall in mass? Or are people hurt? Are people saddened? Are people realizing that the person who's supposed to be their quote-unquote hero was a terrible person? And for those of us who have always thought this and knew this about him through osmosis, through just looking at him and reading his energy, are we just saying, this is sad and he needs to be held accountable? Who is laughing? Who is celebrating? Who is celebrating someone getting violently attacked? No one is celebrating that. No one is celebrating that. Dr. Umar using celebration here, again, is an attempt at manipulation. When he brings up 40% of Black women in his mind have experienced DV, mind you, these are the people who report. A lot of women do not report DV. A lot of women go through DV and don't even know that they've experienced DV, right? A lot of victims don't know that they are victims. And the idea that you will use this reality when it's convenient for you to say, but no one is talking about this. Why haven't you? Why aren't you speaking the loudest? When people have been sitting up there on Fox News with you, telling you about Black femicide, you brushed it off, ignored it, and now you've adopted the language, which good for you, but actually use the language. Actually use the language. He said, did you call the police on Black men when did you call the police on people when they abuse Black women? And you know. Fair question. You just called Black women the greatest accomplice to white supremacy. Then you are chastising them for not calling the police on men who abuse them, and upwards of 40% of Black women have been abused in your mind. Now, make this make sense for me. How do you, and I know you can, reconcile both calling Black women the greatest accomplice to white supremacy, which if they were, one would believe that they would want to call the police on Black men, but they don't, and so you're chastising them for not calling the police, which I agree they should, while also saying that they're the greatest accomplice to white supremacy, and they're also the greatest contributor to your success as a speaker, and I'm assuming a writer and a school builder. The school doesn't exist, but I'm just going to give you that for argument's sake. How do you reconcile those ideas? It is kind of odd to tell Black women, again, to call the police on Black men, while also calling Black women the greatest accomplice to white supremacy.
Because although white supremacy has been the greatest enemy of the progress of Black men, you would also have to argue that Black women have probably been the greatest accomplice to supporting the white power structure in their destruction of Black males, i.e. the conversation we're having right now, where two intelligent Black women have yet to indict white supremacy.
I think that is an interesting take from Dr. Umar. And it is because of that, I'm going to say, girl, no, but it is because of this that I don't take as valid most of Dr. Umar's critique. Dr. Umar's rhetoric is laced with contradiction. It is extremely important that we understand that Umar says whatever is in his argument's best interest at the time that he's making the argument, regardless of how it contradicts something that he previously stated and a stance that he previously had. This, for me, is a lack of principle and why I cannot support Dr. Umar, but also why I don't take as legitimate what he believes and says and engages with. This part is important. Oftentimes, I come on here and I'm not quite sure if I am right. I know I am right about the numbers. I know I am right about the reasoning. But sometimes I feel like there is an unwillingness to empathize with the person who is the victimizer. And that does have a kind of double-edged sword issue, which I won't get into. But I do think everyone deserves, at least from my perspective, from me, not telling anyone else to do it, some level of empathy. And I'm worried that I go, quote unquote, too hard on the issues intraracially. But hearing Dr. Umar so eloquently espouses them, right, in defense of Diddy, again, we'll get back to the word defense in a moment. Hearing him defend Diddy with the stats in the black community now lets me understand that he is aware. And a lot of people are actually aware. Like, it took a lot of learning and research for me to get the understanding of what is happening intraculturally between black men and black women. Like, it took a lot of learning for me because I was in a bubble. But a lot of people who are not in this bubble know what is happening to black women in the community, and they just completely ignore it. In the fight against white supremacy, they ignore the destruction of homes, of family, and of black women's reputation, their bodies, physically, mentally, psychologically, and if you believe spiritually, the destruction happening intraracially is completely being ignored by people who are fully aware. The fact that Dr. Umar has this information and does not use them readily in conversations about the black community is absolutely diabolical.
See, I cannot condone hypocrisy, Art. I can't condone hypocrisy. If we are this adamant against domestic abuse, why is it so prevalent in the black community? Do you know that a black woman is 3 times as likely to be murdered by her romantic partner than a white woman? 3 times as likely. And I don't have to tell you, you watch the news, this whole year has been a killing spree against black women. I've seen more black women murdered this year by their baby dad, by their estranged husband, by the fiance, more this year than I've seen in quite some time. You have white men who are taking black women on dates, beheading them, chopping their body parts up and distributing them all over the town, as was just happened in Ohio a few weeks ago and elsewhere in this country. It has been nothing but a homicide year for black women. Femicide in our community is a major problem. So if we are that in agreement against the abuse of black women, why is it so prevalent? Black women, when you find out your son, your nephew, your uncle, your brother, your father is beating on their women, have you called the police? Black men, when you find out your son, your nephew, your father, your uncle, your brother is beating up on black women, do you chin check him? Do you grab him by the collar? Do you pull him out the house and give his ass a good stomping that he deserves? No, you don't. You know what we do, Art? We turn the other cheek. You got black women being beat up in black churches. You got black women being abused in the masjid, Jehovah's Witnesses, all organizations. You can't name me an organization, black conscious movement, mainstream black America, black church, black masjid, fraternity, sorority, Masonics, I don't care what it is. Black women are being beat. Black pastors are beating up their women, and everybody's turning a blind eye. So to me, although Puffy needs to be held accountable, I would have to charge black America with being guilty of hypocrisy because too many black women are being beat down and murdered every day in this country, and I do not see the outcry for them like I see the outcry for Cassie.
A black woman is 3 times more likely to be unalived by her partner than a white woman. So finally, Umar is acknowledging black femicide, right? But he's only doing this to highlight hypocrisy in the black community. That's it. That is all. This year, he says that there has been an unaliving spree on black women. Yeah, now take that a bit further, right? And explain who is doing the unaliving. And if you believe, oh, he said the baby daddy, no, he doesn't explain. He doesn't. He's very keen on explaining when it was a white man. He gives a very specific example of a white man thrown in with the rest of the men. And this is not to say all races of men don't engage in some kind of bad behavior, but it is wild to only use race, specifically when he's pointing out a graphic story of a white man unaliving a black woman, and went through that entire diatribe, not pointing out that they're being unalived at the hands of black men, people closest to them, proximity. The use of race to highlight the gruesome unaliving of the black woman in his story is important and would have been justified if he would only also admit to the race of men also unaliving black women at the highest rate. And I do think it's problematic to highlight that one story as opposed to a myriad of different kinds of story, or at least use race to explain what is happening, even if you're going to use the argument of proximity to explain why people within the same race are more prone to unaliving each other. So that's wild. So from my perspective, it doesn't seem like Dr. Umar cares to have this kind of knowledge to ramble off back to back to back should animate you to act. If you are this annoyed by the hypocrisy in the Black community, I feel you should be annoyed also at the existence of the harm in the Black community, not just the hypocrisy. And that kind of animation to speak out against the hypocrisy should be doubly so to speak out against the reality of the experience of Black women who are being abused. The fact that Dr. Umar isn't as outraged at the women being abused as he is when it comes to the hypocrisy aimed at Diddy is absolutely bizarre to me. And it means that he does not care. Again, this is an attempt to divert energy from Cassie, and not towards Black women, but out into the ether, away from anyone and anything. He's not attempting to make life better for Black women. He just does not want you to continue to talk about Diddy. He's calling you a hypocrite because he doesn't want to hear you talk about Diddy. He doesn't want to hear you talk about anyone, actually, in the Black community who is causing harm. Because he would tell you to just talk about those other people. Instead, he just wants you to shut up and not be a hypocrite. Because he didn't talk about those other people, don't talk about Diddy. That is what he's doing. He does not care where the power, where the energy goes. He just does not want it aimed at Black men and in the community. And specifically in this case, he does not want it aimed at Diddy. Umar cannot claim to care about Black women and want to shed light on Black women being unalive while intentionally ignoring who is doing it. I think that is impossible. To say the partners, the husband, and the baby daddy is not enough when he clearly uses race any other time. Use race now. It is my assertion that Dr. Umar does not care outside of defending Diddy. A blanket of protection is what Dr. Umar is throwing around Diddy, even by indicting the Black community. The indictment of the Black community and its hypocrisy is done to protect Diddy. That's it, that's all. That's it, that's all. And I think this is a defense. The condemnation of Diddy's action does not mean he's not. Dr. Umar, is not defending Diddy. Yes, he condemned the action, yet he's still defending him by telling us to be silent. He's not saying, talk about the others. He's saying, you didn't talk about the others. Why are y'all talking about this? You're a hypocrite. That's what he's doing. He doesn't say stop being a hypocrite by talking about the others. He's telling you to shut up. Hopefully he sees this and change his rhetoric. But for now, he's telling you, stop talking about Diddy because you talked about no one else. Not talk about everyone else that you didn't talk about and also talk about Diddy. And yes, I heard him talk about the Black pastors. I did. It is too easy for Dr. Umar to go against organized religion in the form of the church. He hates the church. This is easy for Dr. Umar. He doesn't get credit from me for pointing out the problems within the church, though I do agree with him. He's correct. The way that the leaders in the church operate is very predatory. It is disgusting, but Dr. Umar don't care about that. Dr. Umar does not care about that. Dr. Umar cares about the money that he perceived the church to be getting and him not. Now, I'm not saying allegedly because this is not a true assertion in the way that it's factual. It is an opinion that I have based on Dr. Umar's engagement with the Black community. I believe Dr. Umar does not like the church because the church represents a scamming institution in his mind when it comes to Black people, and he wants to be the only scammer. But we know he hates the church, so him highlighting that the church is a problem isn't a big deal. He's been highlighting this. He's been hating the church. What this highlights is, sadly for me, Umar is fully aware of the issues in the Black community, particularly as it relates to Black women and Black women's experiences, and the fact that he does not engage with it at all in any meaningful way, unless he's attempting to win an argument, is absolutely bizarre. What Dr. Umar talks about is white supremacy, and rightfully so, but to ignore the intraracial issues and the plight of Black women, I think is a detriment to the people who support Dr. Umar the most. And that's also wild. The fact that Black women are so supportive of Dr. Umar while he so obviously ignores Black womanhood. And I say obviously ignore because the way he's talking now, this is not something he learned yesterday. This is something that Dr. Umar seemed to have deep, intimate knowledge about, the plight of Black women. And he only weaponizes it against Cassie, and he does not engage with it in an effort to actually help Black women. He has never actually, not that I can see, but if I'm mistaken, please send me the clip. I've never seen Dr. Umar actually engages where the platform he creates, the speech he does, is centered on Black women and the kind of exploitative nature within the Black relationships that exist for Black women. I'm reminded of Ralph Richard Banks' piece where he was expressing ideas around Black women dating out and opening their option. And Dr. Umar reviewed the piece, and in his review of the Ralph Richard Banks' article, Dr. Umar was outraged, but he could not push back against anything that Dr. Ralph Richard Banks was talking about. In fact, it seems Dr. Umar agreed with Ralph Richard Banks all the way up until the conclusion. All the way meaning the experience of Black women is that they cannot find suitable partners within the Black community, that they're experiencing a ton of DV. A lot of the men don't go to school, a lot of the men go to prison, a lot of the men don't have access to work, a lot of the men don't know how to engage, right? And Dr. Ralph Richard Banks' conclusion was for Black women to find happiness, they have to go out and find it elsewhere, or open their option to include Black men and other kinds of men, right? And Dr. Umar agreed with the experience of Black women, but his conclusion was Black women are God and they're the first and they have a responsibility to continue the community. Thus, they have to look beyond their own wants and needs and experience and stick within the community that is treating them poorly. And like Dr. Umar, ignoring the Black woman's plight until it's convenient for them in a conversation or debate to weaponize Black women's plight, to not actually address it, but to move on from it. And that's the problem. I am also morally correct, by the way, and I'll go back to this. And it's important that I'm not just logically correct, but morally correct in that the way that Black women experience the world in their communities is a problem, right? And Dr. Umar pointing it out now just to win a conversation, an argument, or to point out hypocrisy, only further highlights that morally what we should be doing is addressing this harm. Even though Dr. Umar only gives it lip service here, we should be engaging with it. And because Dr. Umar does not want to engage with it doesn't mean we shouldn't. And I'm glad he brought it up because a lot of the time, as I said previously, I am left to wonder if I'm doing the right thing. The right thing is the right thing is the right thing. And Dr. Umar knows what the right thing is, he just doesn't care. Again, like a lot of people, they know, they don't care. And I think this makes Dr. Umar morally bankrupt. When he says no one cares about Black women when they're abused, I care. A lot of people should care, and Dr. Umar, you have a responsibility to care. If you and your ilk did anything important, it should be to address the harm being caused within the Black community. You should also fight about white supremacy. I don't mind that, but I don't think a lot of y'all care about what happens to Black women at all. It is very clear that holding Diddy accountable for his wrongdoing is something that Umar does not want to see. And I don't fully know why he's throwing his hat in this ring outside of wanting to prove himself to celebrities, which is also wild because Dr. Umar is talking about ownership and why we are so aggressive against Diddy, but we don't do it against anyone else. The Black community is not the one holding Diddy accountable. Let me repeat that 2 more times for Dr. Umar. The Black community is not the one holding Diddy accountable. The Black community is not the one holding Diddy accountable. Dr. Umar knows this because we always hear, and Dr. Umar and everyone else talk about the lack of ownership within the Black community. So when people are canceling Diddy's brand deals and networks and contracts and all of that, it's not Black people doing that. It's not. Umar knows this. He wants Black people to rise up behind Diddy and say they're trying to take a Black man down. No, they're not. Diddy is abusive. We saw it on tape, and it is problematic for you to attempt to invoke ideas around white supremacy in an effort to defend Diddy. And again, I will continue to use the word defense. Now let's hear what he has to say further about Harvey Weinstein.
And let me go a step further. Let me go another point. Because we're dealing with the hypocrisy of this. I am not defending Sean Puffy Combs. I can sit here and tell you in the presence of my ancestors and in the presence of the Almighty, brother, I have never put my hands on a woman in my life. There's not a woman on this earth who can say Dr. Umar physically abused me. I could never do that because I've seen domestic violence in my own home growing up as a child. I know what it is, brother. And because of that, I promised myself I would never put my hands on a woman. But here's another question I got for Black America. If you care about domestic abuse so much, why were you absolutely quiet when the New York Appeals Court overturned Harvey Weinstein's conviction? Harvey Weinstein, who was accused of sexually abusing more than 100 women, plenty of them were Black, and guess what? His conviction just got overturned. I ain't heard a word from nobody on YouTube. And Harvey Weinstein's attorney just said that because the New York case was overturned, Harvey Weinstein is still in jail for the Los Angeles conviction. But his attorney said circumstances involved in the New York case that was just overturned could lead to his Los Angeles conviction also being overturned, which means Harvey Weinstein could be set free someday soon. Why isn't Black America talking about that? Why isn't Black America talking about that? Are we really against domestic violence, or are we just celebrating the downfall of a great Black mogul? Let me go another step. The Roman Catholic Church. The Roman Catholic Church. Are you aware that the Roman Catholic Church has admitted to at least 11,000 separate sexual assaults of Roman Catholic priests upon innocent children? Let me say that again. 11,000 separate sexual assaults against innocent children by the priests of the Roman Catholic Church. At least 4,300 priests are involved. 11,000 acts of child sex abuse in the Roman Catholic Church. At least 4,300 priests are involved. If we are against domestic violence, Art, can I ask you a question? Why do we still have 3 million American African Catholics in the United States of America? How in the hell do you go back to Catholic Mass, Black people who claim to be against domestic violence? How do you go back to Catholic Mass? How are you still a member of the Roman Catholic Church when over 11,000 separate incidents of child sex assault involving over 4,300 Roman Catholic priests? You claim you don't support domestic violence, and you still belong to a church that admits to over 11,000 acts of it. Will the real hypocrite please stand up? Will the real hypocrite please stand up? If we against it, why so many women being beat? Why are so many women being killed by their lovers? Why aren't their girlfriends saying anything? Their cousins aren't saying anything. Their next door neighbors aren't saying anything. Women in the congregation, men in the congregation aren't saying anything. If we hate domestic violence, why are Black women the greatest victims of it?
This is a red herring. It is a red herring if I've ever seen one. There are problems here, but it is a red herring nonetheless. He says Harvey Weinstein is overturned, blah, 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 whatever. Harvey Weinstein is still in jail. But okay. And what do you want Black people to do about Harvey Weinstein exactly? No, for real, for real. What do you want Black people in the community to do about Harvey Weinstein? No one is celebrating anywhere. This is all bad. The idea that the Roman Catholic Church engages the way that they do, again, what do you want Black people to do about it? What percent of these priests are Black? What do you want Black people to do about that? Why are you bringing that up? Again, I'm not saying you shouldn't, and I'm not saying this is not a discussion that we should have. We should not have. We should have the discussion. The time and place seems odd, and we can have the discussion, but you're saying you're not defending Diddy, but it's definitely feeling like you're saying, look over here and not at Diddy. It's like he can say, Diddy did nothing wrong, because we all saw Diddy did something wrong. Initially, by the way, Umar said Diddy and Cassie and money and all of that foolishness, he's going to do it again. So I'm not even going to play that, because he still believes that what Cassie is doing is about money, and we'll get to that in a moment. So I'm not even going to play those clips. But what do you mean? The Roman Catholic Church and Harvey Weinstein, yes, we can definitely look at them and we can talk about it, but that doesn't change the fact that we should also hold Diddy accountable. Are you saying we shouldn't hold Diddy accountable until we hold other people accountable? And also, what do you want the Black community to do about Roman Catholic priests and Harvey Weinstein? No, for real, for real. Or what do you want us to do? Tell us. Can we not talk about all of them together? Because, I mean, if you care about what the Roman Catholic Church is doing, period, talk about it. If you care about Harvey Weinstein, I don't know, talk about it. If you care about Diddy and what he did, talk about it. Why are you doing a whataboutism when you can say yes and? Say it with your chest and. But when it comes to DV, why are Black women disproportionately affected and are treated poorly? I believe it is because of the worship of Black men. I do. And I didn't even understand the whole idea of Black male worship. This came from sin, right? But I didn't understand it fully. But now I get it. But I think that's why. But it is wild that you tell Black women that they are the right hand, the biggest contributors to white supremacy if they turn a Black man in, while also chastising them for not turning Black men in. When we look at what happened to Megan Thee Stallion, I feel like this is a perfect example of how the community tries to treat women, Black women, who engage in any kind of protective work, right? And it's not even that Megan Thee Stallion wanted to protect herself. We've seen example of Megan Thee Stallion in the past, lied to protect her boyfriend, who then lied to make her go to jail. and get a mugshot. Our culture, in the way that Dr. Umar perceives it and expresses it, tells women to be strong and that there is a war against black men, and that black women's duty in the war against black men is to protect black men even when they, black women, are being harmed by said black men. And that's the problem. And whenever a woman steps out of this line of protecting black men, they are told by people like Dr. Umar that they're the greatest contributor to white supremacy. And then the same Dr. Umar comes out and chastises the rest of the community who didn't step out of line, who he didn't get to call the biggest contributor to white supremacy. He then gets to call them hypocrites whenever they try to hold anyone accountable because they don't hold everyone accountable. And that's the problem.
If we hate domestic violence, why are black women the greatest victims of it? Or do we only care when it's a light-skinned celebrity involved? And let me go a step further, Art. I got to go a step further. I gave you my moral answer. I want to switch to the legal.
He says, do we only care when there's a light-skinned woman involved? Black women are more frequently abused and no one cares, so we only care when there is a light-skinned woman involved. This, by the way, is an attempt at weaponizing colorism. The thing is, Dr. Umar doesn't care about anything. Why wasn't Dr. Umar front and center when it comes to black women abuse? I talk about it, some other people on YouTube talk about it, a lot of women on YouTube talk about it. Dr. Umar does not use this as a main part at least, of the conversations that he have online. So for him to pretend like other people don't care about it as well when he, Dr. Umar, doesn't. So the use of colorism here is wild to me, but it's wild for another reason. It's not just his lack of care generally and his attempt to ignore what is happening and make us ignore what is happening with Cassie and by extension a lot of women across the globe of all races. That's not only what's important here. It is diabolical for another reason. Here it is. Didn't Dr. Umar say it was the blood that matters? I am pretty sure Dr. Umar said when it comes to black people specifically and whether or not you're black, it is not your light skin, you could be close to white, he doesn't care. It is
The blood that matters.
here, because it sounds like I'm insane when I say this, and I'm not. This is what Dr. Umar had to say about the blood.
I got allies and brothers and sisters I stand in solidarity with who are mixed race. I ain't got no problem. Some of them look damn near like white folks, but guess what? They my brothers and sisters. The first color on the Marcus Garvey flag is red. The first color on the Marcus Garvey flag is red. Black is the middle color. Black is the middle color. Why does red come before black, mixed race Africans? Why does red come before black on the Marcus Garvey flag? Why is red before black? You know why red is the first color on the flag of Marcus Garvey? You know why red is the first color on the revolutionary Pan-African flag? Because it is the blood that makes you African, not your skin tone. It is the blood that makes you African, not your skin tone. Not everybody is blessed to be kissed of the sun.
So it is the blood, unless you're mixed and you're going after a black man who abused you. Got it. You're African and you're the brothers and sisters if you are even close to white. As long as you're not going after a black man. Because if you are, then you're not. I thought Cassie was black, by Dr. Umar's standards. Oh, she's only black until she starts going after a man who abused her. Got it. Oh, also, she's now married to a white man, so I'm pretty sure that has him in all kinds of tizzy. And he's going to specifically point this out. He's going to be very mad. Let's get into let's hear him do the legal part, because he is going to be upset, cross, angry, miserable. Sorry, if you're Jamaican, you know, you know. in the words of J-Lo, when you know, cross, angry, miserable. Sorry, I had to. Here we go.
I want to switch to the legal. Cassie settled with Puff for 30 mils, which she took back to her white husband. If I were speaking with Cassie, and I want to be clear, I would never blame her for what she went through. I would never blame her for what she went through. I know what survivor's remorse is all about. I am in the field of psychology. I would never blame her or try to scapegoat her for what Puffy did to her. I would never do that to any woman. But if I were talking to Cassie, I would ask her this stuff. Sister Cassie. And I don't know if she identifies as black or mixed race or whatever bag she in. She definitely bunny hopping right now. But this is what I would ask her. Was this about justice or was this about money? Because when you were with Puffy, because he's Sean Puffy Combs, you could have went into any police precinct. You could have picked up the phone and called any criminal defense lawyer in America and told them, I'm Sean Puffy Combs' lover, and I'm afraid of my life because he is abusing me on a regular basis. Do you know how many lawyers would have jumped at an opportunity that not only put him behind bars, but also get her a payday? I'm talking about when it was happening. When it was happening. She could have got justice immediately when it was happening. So if I was talking to my sister Cassie, assuming she claims to be black, if I was talking to my sister Cassie, is this about justice or is this about money? Because if this is about justice and protecting sisters from domestic abuse, why didn't you run him to the police when you were still with Puffy? Why are we just now hearing about this 8 years later or however many years after the fact? Why did you wait until you married a white man and then came back to get the black man's money? Was this about money or was this about justice? I'm not shaming her. I'm simply saying I'm confused. Because if this is about women's rights and protecting women, why didn't you run his ass into the police back when this was happening? It's not like he a brother who just got out of prison, Art. It's not like he's a homeless boyfriend from high school. It's not like he's a brother working a regular 9 to 5. This is Sean Puffy Combs, the face of black music, who was a mogul before Jay-Z became a mogul. She would have had no problem embarrassing him, holding him accountable, getting him charged or convicted, but she waited it out. She waited it out. And after she finally left that situation, thank God she did, moved on, got her white husband, she comes back to get $30 million. Is it justice or is it extortion?
So you heard all of that. Let's hear him. In him talking about this legally, there's nothing legal about what this man is talking about. That's the first issue. So he wasn't doing anything legally at all. Cassie settled and took money back to her white husband. What does this have to do with the law now, girl? What does her husband being white have to do with your legal analysis that you just said that you were going to give us? She sued, he settled, she took it home, she's with a white man, she gave a black man's money to a white man, and what about it? He claims he would never blame her. Okay, what are you doing right now? When Dr. Umar opens his mouth and says, was this about justice or was this about money? Okay, girl, is reparations about justice or is it about money? Oh, it can be both? Justice can come in the form of compensation? Really? You see how dumb that sounds when you say, is it about justice or money? It's not or. It can be both. Sitting up there, so you wanted her to be like, no, I'm not going to take the money you owe me for the pain and suffering you caused, for my silence. Really? So you're upset that Cassie comes back to Diddy and says, you abused me, you caused me harm, pay for it. Why would you be upset? Isn't that what we're doing? When it comes to reparation, isn't this what we understand about a very litigious system, the American system? What's wrong with that? When a psychologist says, why does a woman who's been through a DV wait to come forward? I'm going to question their credential. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm going to question a psychologist. I'm going to question someone with the credential as a psychologist who is openly critiquing someone for not coming and speaking about their trauma when they weren't ready. Financially, physically, emotionally, psychologically, when they weren't ready. How does a psychologist sit up there, a person with their background in psychology, just sit up there and ask this question in a way to delegitimize Cassie, the person who's been through trauma? I don't understand how you could do that. You must completely disregard your own research, your own study, your own learning. You have to disregard all of that in an attempt to defend a degenerate man if you're going to ask the question, why didn't she come forward earlier than now? What do you mean as a psychologist? I'm not talking to about us everyday people. I'm talking about someone with a degree in psychology who's worked in the field of psychology, sitting up there asking why a woman wouldn't come forward in the moment she's being abused to talk about said abuse. That you don't understand how a woman would wait till she is safe and had worked through some of the trauma she's been through to then come forward and talk about her experience and be kind of plastered all over the media and discuss very publicly some of the most traumatic experiences of her life. I am confused why a psychologist wouldn't have the answer to that. I'm confused why a psychologist doesn't understand how an extraordinarily powerful man who has been abusing women and men for years and covering it up, who has apparently allegedly blew up someone's car, shot someone in the face and have someone else cover for him, how a woman experiencing a man who is that powerful would be afraid to speak up. I am concerned. I am also confused why a psychologist would be asking why this woman experiencing all this kind of trauma compounded by a very rich, successful, and powerful man, why she wouldn't come forward. I'm confused why you would ask that question. Unless you're not actually looking for an answer and you're ignoring your own education in an effort to defend him. He says, why did she come back to get the black man's money? Sir, did he abuse her? Come in, you should have gotten more. I don't know how much she gotten, but I'm sure she should have gotten more. Again, I'm trying to find the legal aspect of whatever critique this is, because he said this was the legal part. It is wild to me, again, that someone who studies psychology would sit there and say, if it was about women's rights, why didn't you just do it when you were being traumatized? Why didn't you come forward and speak when you were traumatized? In the midst of your trauma, why didn't you speak up is a disgusting statement to be made generally, but doubly so from a psychologist. Asking if this is an extortion is an attempt, I think, to make Diddy the victim. This, by the way, is why I say he's defending Diddy. He's claiming that Cassie's extorting Diddy. Wild statement to make. An extortion is illegal, mind you. And that you think Cassie is extorting Diddy, you have turned Diddy into a victim, and you're telling us that you're not attempting to defend Diddy. You're a degenerate too. In the beginning, he talks about how he's never hurt a woman. It doesn't make you a good person to not have harmed someone when you're providing cover for those who would harm someone and those who have harmed people. You're also a problem now. Let's continue.
And here's the point I want to make, and I'll close on this point. I'm concerned, Art, because I'm seeing the white power structure go after wealthy black men with old, outdated accusations of domestic abuse and sex abuse. Don't get me wrong. I don't trivialize sexual violence against women. I don't trivialize domestic violence against women because our women suffer from it the most. I don't trivialize it. I don't make light of it. But to have these women come back 8 years later, 10 years later, Bill Cosby, 40 years later, for financial demands for money, or try to get somebody incarcerated decades after, years after the offense, when you chose to do nothing at the time with celebrity men. I'm not talking everyday men, Art. We're talking celebrity men who have a lot to lose. I just can't sit by as a black man and say I'm okay with the legal system letting these women pop up whenever they feel like it 5, 10, 30, 40 years later and say he did this to me and I want money even if he can't get jail time. If you really cared about justice, you would have brought suit against that black man before the statute of limitations expired.
In other words, he does not see abuse of women as a big deal. If you as a woman take too long to work through your abuse and find the strength to go after the person who would abuse you, Dr. Umar is going to find a problem with it because how dare you take that long a time to deal with what is happening to you. He opens this section by saying, the white power structure is going after wealthy black men. Girl, did these men do what they claim they did? Did these men do what these women claim they did? 40, 50, 60 years later, go after him, drag him. What do you mean? You're harming people and you thought, oh, if I wait long enough, I shouldn't. I hate the statute of limitation. It's annoying me in these very specific cases because it ignores, right? The statute of limitations when it comes to these women being victims and people being victims generally is a problem for me specifically because it is not right to want people to work through their own trauma at your pace. And you should not be worried about, as a legal system, giving abusers a peace of mind. Absolutely not. Whenever you cause harm to people in this very specific way, hitting someone, beating someone, harming someone, when you cause those kinds of harm, you should have that hang over your head for the rest of your life. So you know at any point that person you abuse can come back and drag you in court. That's what I believe. Yeah, I do believe they should be able to come back 100 years. You should be old and have your grandkids and have forgotten about it and they should drag you into court, yes. Again, a psychologist not knowing why someone who's been traumatized needs to work through their trauma before they go public and defend themselves is wild to me. If you had someone like this harm you, I believe you should forever have an opportunity to drag them into court. Forget the statute of limitation. Dr. Umar and this guy doing the interview then goes on to discuss the apology video. This video is already too long, so I'm not going to discuss Diddy's apology video. So I'm just going to jump to the conclusion now of my video. Dr. Umar is only concerned about the black man's money. That is it, that is all. He does not care about DV, he only cares about money. And probably just posturing himself right now to try to become friends with celebrities who think that Dr. Umar will be out here on the media circuit defending them when they get caught up. Again, Umar does not seem to care about DV, he doesn't care about these women, he don't care about it at all. He only cares about this money. And he only cares about black women insofar as he can use them, get money from them, and consistently have them pour into him without giving them anything back in return. The school is not happening, hasn't happened yet, and I'm waiting to see if it happens. Then we'll talk about what I truly believe about some of the very specific statements he's made about learning and his ability to teach, but I'm waiting for the school to be built for that. Umar does not speak consistently at all about femicide. In fact, this is one of the very first times that I've heard Dr. Umar engage with femicide, again, to distract from what Cassie is going through and not to point at black femicide in any meaningful way, but to distract as a red herring from the conversation at hand, where we can do both, and we should be doing both, talking about Cassie and Diddy, and also black femicide. Yeah, we can talk about both of them. We've been doing that. It can be done, and Dr. Umar should do it. He knows he can do it. He just doesn't care to do it. It is the same defense, mind you, that Dr. Umar is launching when he says, we are not careful and we are hypocrites and we don't actually care. This is the same kind of defense people give to their friends who they know are wrong. It's the red herring defense. It's, okay, he's wrong. Look over there, right? And then it's also whataboutism, where it's like, but what about? How about we engage with the issue at hand? Dr. Umar doesn't want that. Y'all remember when the baby was doing this homophobic foolishness on stage and everyone was frightened when he got canceled because he did what he did internally and got praised for outside of the community and got dragged? This feels like what Dr. Umar is going through. It is a cognitive dissonance about, one, who is holding the baby and Diddy accountable, and who they want to hold accountable for hypocrisy. It's not black people holding Diddy accountable, sir. I wish it were. That would have been a great thing, but it's not. In the way that it wasn't the black people holding the baby accountable for his homophobia. We generally don't hold people accountable for their homophobia. But in any case, I think it is important to note that Dr. Umar believes this is just a conspiracy to take the black men down. Let me play Dr. Umar talking about how this is a conspiracy to take Diddy down because Diddy was about to buy some liquor company. Here, this is Dr. Umar. This is what Dr. Umar wants us to believe.
Puff Daddy's problems didn't start until he decided to sue the parent company of the liquor brand that he sells. Right after that, that's when the first allegation started. So a part of me says that this is a smack on the hand and remind him who's really in charge. I think it's an experiment. It's a social experiment by the American white power structure to see how willing black America will be in allowing them to destroy our billionaires as a pretext to destroying our revolutionaries. So who decided to target him and not all the others guilty of the same crimes? You follow what I'm saying? So this clearly ain't about sex trafficking because they do that. It ain't about molestation, they do that. It ain't about rape or exploitation of women, they do that. You understand? Yeah. The whole culture is based on that. So he can't be getting in trouble for that because the whole music industry be getting in trouble for that. Puffy has no need to sexually traffic women and children. He can pay people to come to his house. Now, what he does to them after then could be subject to some legal inquiry, right? But to say Puffy is out here participating in the kidnapping of strangers, bringing them to his house and then selling them, I'm not buying that. But sexually trafficking strangers and bringing them to his house and hiding them and selling them, no way do I believe that.
Blah, 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 blah. Did he do what he said? And by he, I mean the men claim Diddy did to them. But did he also do what Cassie said he did to her? Did he do it? If he did, go get out of my face talking about this didn't happen to the liquor company. We don't care. When you're acting in degenerate ways, it comes back and bites you. And I like the fact that for the first time, we're seeing people be held accountable in hip-hop for this kind of degenerate behavior. So please stop, go get help, both Diddy and Umar, and don't engage this way because I don't care to hear you sit up there and defend this man and pretend like you're not defending him. And there is this whole, oh, he's an intellectual, Dr. Umar is an intellectual. I'm failing to see that. And until he builds a school, I'm not giving him any grace. I'm sorry, I can't, I won't, I refuse. I don't think it is right for us to excuse Umar's behavior. And the reason why is because Dr. Umar is seen, for a lot of people, I don't know why, as some kind of intellectual. And as such, he has the ear of everyday black people. And he is able to convince, he's able to convince them of giving him money to build a school. So apparently he's able to convince people of doing a lot of things that are against their interests, i.e. giving their hard-earned money away to him to do absolutely nothing with, even when he's gambling, talking about he's gambling to raise money for the school. The fact that there are people out here still supporting Dr. Umar financially is absolutely wild and diabolical to me. Until I see the school, I don't want to hear anything from Dr. Umar. But I do find it odd that someone who is as, this phrase, degreed up as Dr. Umar engages in the way that Dr. Umar does, where he doesn't seem to care about reason and rationale at all. He's just here to defend the black man, in this case Diddy, without any care for the victims, and using black womanhood and black women's trauma to help him defend Diddy is wild, because the truth is, Diddy represents the black men who are abusing women, in that they will also abuse other races of women too. So like, it's saying, oh, I don't care because Cassie is not black, doesn't change the fact that, well, hasn't Diddy been accused of just running amok, like abusing black women, white women, Cassie type women, men also, black and all. Look, I'm just gonna end this video here. Just know Umar is wrong, and that's all we need to know. That's all we need to agree on. He is wrong, and it was, in my opinion, a defense of Diddy that Umar has launched. He can't defend him outright by saying he's innocent and he didn't do it. So what he's doing is doing this whataboutism and all these red herrings. It doesn't matter. Degenerate is as degenerate does. On that note, I'm going to end here. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you again later. Bye. All right. Not bye. I am not here. I hope you all miss me. I'm actually not gone, so it's weird to be pre-recording this in advance of me being gone. But I know that I will miss you at that point. I already do miss you because I'm not going live. I haven't gone live this week. And that's really sad. I'm like, I need to go. Let me stop. And for all of you all who are messaging me, asking me if I wear makeup, I do not. I don't have makeup on right now. I did perfect the glass skin look for black people, and I'm thinking I should provide that information, but part of it is drinking a lot of water and actually having healthy skin generally, and then adding products to it. But I looked at the Korean glass skin, and then I adopted it, and now I think I have great skin, so I appreciate you, only my face. Anyway, all right, I'm gone now. I'm gone. Please stop listening to Dr. Umar. Please, 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 please. Like, if we do it, let's do it for entertainment only and not like him being a serious intellectual. All right, thank you. Bye.